so let's just hop right into this. Thanks for coming today, everybody. Interesting times we're in, definitely, and the focus of this today is going to be, well, you'll see what this looks like, but this was part of a thought process where I felt like I was seeing a lot of people just sort of hunkering down and waiting for the all clear to come, and then we'd have no problems or changes or what have you. And so you'll see where we're going with this shortly, and let's just hop right into it and get a mouse going. There we go. So tell me if you think any of this is true or something that's gone through your mind before. Leaner cash flow, you're worried that you can't pay your employees much longer, or you're worried you won't be able to hire them back. You're concerned you may need to close part of your business down and make some hard decisions that will impact your employees negatively. Or for the employees you decide to let go of, you'd like to know how to do that without them staging a rebellion or taking you to court possibly. And my intention for today is that by the end of this webinar, you're going to have a clear understanding of how you can handle these situations in a way that protects your business and has integrity with you. Just a quick intro again, Tom Engel from Vantage HR, for those of you who don't know me. My goal is to make sure you understand where and how things can go wrong so you can avoid problems and protect what you work so hard to build. So we conducted recently an informal survey among about 150 clients and friends of the company because we were trying to better understand their concerns. Just over half of them focused on this image here. They were laying off or thinking of laying off, questioning whom to bring back, if at all. The other portion were relatively unaffected or growing and hiring. Today we're going to be focusing mostly on the people in this space, the layoff or thinking of layoff space, the ones not doing well and who aren't too sure of what to do next. Problem though with all of this, easy to say, these are tough decisions and there's all kinds of factors that you're going to run into, like how much longer can I pay my employees and will I even be able to hire them back later? Knowing that if you need to shut down parts of your business, it's going to negatively impact your employees, possibly family members very significantly. And then if you do let people go, how do you reduce the risk to your business, like employee grievances, resentment, and possible legal challenges? And frankly, those are all really, really good questions. The way you do that is by creating an HR plan that cuts through the hard decisions. The hard decisions are going to be there. Having a plan to move forward and through that is where we think the key is. An HR plan, ultimately, this is what it's going to do for you delivery-wise. It's going to deliver clarity over what makes the most sense for the longevity of your company so that you're not just making an emotional or gut reaction, but you're really trying to think strategically about what needs to be done to keep your business in business. It's going to give you hopefully a clear sense of the best ways to make the changes your business needs without unsetting employees and taking on unnecessary risk. And finally, it's a way to anticipate different possibilities and ensure you have the people, resources necessary to go where you want to go. The last thing you really want to do at this point is wing it, because when you wing it, you're going to run the risk of making some very costly and detrimental mistakes that could affect the success and longevity of your business. So case in point, there's a company called Hiccups that is a supplier of employment practices liability coverage. So the HR insurance, essentially, in some ways, when things go really wrong. 4 years ago, they do studies every year. They did a study, over 1,000 cases that they handled. Average settlement cost was $160,000. The average time to resolve was over 300 days. This is without going to court. I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily have 160,000 lying around, nor do I want to devote 300 days to a distracting employee grievance. This is why we think it's so important to think through what makes the most sense for your company and create a plan before you take any action. So let's take a look at how to start that. We see a path forward during the uncertainty, a process with 5 main components to think through as you're creating your HR plan, with the final 3 requiring the most focus and energy from you. Those final 3 are what we're going to prioritize today. And here's what we mean by these different phases here. Employee reductions. These are the adjustments you've made or are thinking of making to stabilize cash flow and remain solvent. And maintaining communication, that's a deliberate effort to maintain contact with employees affected, share what you know, help where you can, and hopefully bring them back when you're ready. Containing legal risk is smart, deliberate documentation to avoid being an easy target and to pave the way for your reopening. Planning to bring them back. It's recognizing that things won't come back right away and figuring out the best way to respond to changes and uncertainty on your terms. And then finally, bringing them back, welcoming people back, setting expectations, making them allies in your efforts to adapt to a changed environment. And just by the way, I'm going to be covering as much as I can during this presentation, but for time reasons, I can't cover everything. So at the end, for those who want to go deeper, I will share with you how you can do that. Let's start with the first significant part of the process, containing legal risk. And by that, we are referring to documentation of well-planned systems and processes. During stressful times, some affected people could read things into your actions. This could be layoffs. You or members of your team might have made statements or promises about timelines of bringing them back that later were not met by your organization. Easy thing to do, especially when we had the jolt that we did with COVID. Your employees may have misinterpreted something your company said and claimed that you didn't live up to your side of the bargain, or employees may feel that you were treating them differently as compared to their coworkers. Again, we're back to putting together your HR plan and understanding its importance. So there are 3 core elements your HR plan needs in order to properly protect your company: job descriptions, policies, performance criteria. And here's what we mean here. Just breaking it down. Job descriptions. This is your what. What role does an employee play in the operations of your company? And what do you want them to do? The benefit is that it clears up confusion about who does what, especially if there's confusion or things go wrong. Performance criteria. This is your who. Who's performing well? Who's performing okay? Who isn't making the cut? The benefit here is it defines a consistent set of measurements for employee contributions, and that allows you to manage outcomes based on what's important to you. Lastly, policies. This is your why. Why do we do this and not that? Why did you do something for this person and not me? The benefit is it defines a common set of rules for how the company operates, and it can help minimize successful claims of unfair treatment. These are the 3 most common concerns I hear usually at this point. I haven't started this. This takes too much time. I don't know where to begin. I'm sure I've got some of these things, but I don't know how to add to it or what I should even do. Or I have them all created, but I'm not sure if they're done well enough to protect the company. And I completely get it. Creating these 3 things can be really overwhelming. There's a lot of detail and thought process involved that is not your everyday work. That's why it's good to have a framework that helps you focus on the right things in the right order and the right way. And here's where we're going with this. This is how we approach filling out that framework of those 3 things we just mentioned. It's a thought process I use oftentimes to work with clients. And it goes like this. Actually, let me back up one moment. First off, identify the characteristics of your best employees. So you're trying to do a job description. This is a starting point I use with a lot of people. Think of your best employee, use them as a template. What made them good? What did you appreciate about them? Were they the ones that always showed up on time? Were they the ones that took on all the crappy jobs to get the project across the finish line? Start with that as your beginning and use that to build out your jobs as you understand them. Next thing I do is define descriptions of that person in the most basic terms so that everyone can understand them. This is really important because it not only helps everyone understand, but it cuts through vague terms like teamwork, leadership, communication, hard worker. What do those mean, and how is an employee going to understand what you want? Next thing, determine how you want to measure those values or criteria. Is it output? Is it quality? Is it sales? Well, fair enough, but how do you measure those and using what tools? It could just be a supervisor assessment. So what evaluation scale are you using in that case? And are your measurements reasonable and clear? Next thing I walk people through is how to identify the different levels of your roles. And this is where you start thinking of things like ability, contribution, skills, etc. Are there seasoned people you count on? Are some staff the go-to people for others? You might have junior and senior level roles should your work reflect that. And this is, again, just a way to get you thinking about, well, what are the roles in the company? And then finally, defining the standards all your company needs to know. Those are rules, guidance, values, compensation, benefits. This is where your employee handbooks come into play. So those first four, that's your job descriptions, that's your assessments, your employee assessments, your employee reviews. And then finally, this is your third piece. This is basically your rule book. Does this make sense to people? I'm seeing a nod. This is helpful. Okay. So now that you have a framework, now we're at the next stage of planning to bring them back. And for many of you, this is going to be the most important step in your whole process. This is the point where you're deliberate about what you want to achieve and who you want to keep on board. But this isn't a flick of the switch situation. You really need to challenge some assumptions to build your plan the right way and avoid some costly mistakes. So here's why you want to do that. First off, you just can't assume that business will be the same. And by that, we mean return to the same level immediately, or customers are going to behave in the same way. We don't know how willing customers will be to venture out, or if the virus will remain in check, or what the restrictions will be as we begin to open up. Next up, that the same employees will want to or be able to come back. They could have dropped out of the industry, they could have moved, made other choices in their own best interests. That you should keep the same employees. I mean, were you unhappy with some? Were some what you would consider dead weight, not that effective, like contributing at the level of others? Or don't assume you'll do things the same. You may find aha moments where you realize better ways to operate, and that will require a different view of the people that you need. I am hearing stories about this where people have laid off employees, and maybe the owner and one person, it's a body shop that I know of, and the owner and the one mechanic, the one employee, are doing 65% of the volume of work that 8 people were doing before. It has them scratching their head going, maybe I don't want to have as many people, or maybe I do want to do something different, or maybe I don't need that person, and that person to be successful as I come out of this. This is why you need to put a return to work plan together. And here are some things to consider as you're doing that. To design your return to work plan, some things to think about. First off, are you planning to restructure given that now is probably the perfect time to do that? Will you be downsizing, eliminating, creating more remote positions? Who are you planning to bring back? Who maybe are you planning to let go? And finally, are there family members involved? And how can we make sure they're taken care of without creating an unfair situation or the appearance of unfairness while fulfilling any of your family commitments? With these big questions do come some important considerations, such as, what are the changes in employee responsibilities that employees will be experiencing? These need to be clearly outlined in their job descriptions so they know what's expected of them. How will your company policies be changing? Will employees be required to punch in a different way? Will they be required to attend meetings in person once a week? All these sorts of things need to be clearly outlined in your policies so that people are clear on their expectations and accountabilities. Whose positions are you eliminating, and why did you choose to do that? And if it's related to their performance, what criteria did you use to let them go? your reasons need to be clearly documented. And as you go through this, if you identify holes in your documentation, you can use this as an opportunity to learn and improve, to go back and take care of those things. Because often, again, when I get to this point, it's people are thinking, oh my goodness, I have nothing, I haven't touched anything in years. This is not what I want to be working on right now. But even if you don't have these in place, it's really not too late. This is the perfect time to focus on this and get it taken care of. As you begin to think through the changes your company needs to make, you can also be thinking through how to do it legally and lay a solid foundation for your organization moving forward. So where do you even start with any of this? And as we mentioned earlier, we're gonna, in a previous slide, we're gonna revisit the what, who, and why again, so that you have a really good idea of where you even begin with this. First off, your what. First place you want to go are the job descriptions, and that's your what. It's here that you decide the roles and responsibilities of every employee, which can change as your business changes. It's not like you make these things once and you can never change them again. These are general descriptions of the roles you want to be handled in your company. You know, the advantage is if you needed to downsize, you know, who could take on those additional roles that still need to be handled? Next up is your who. You know, that who's doing well in their role? Why will you be picking them over somebody else if you need to promote, demote, or let somebody go? And finally, your why again, the final place you want to revisit, your policies, your whys here. Some statement of on what basis are you making those decisions? You know, what were your reduction in force criteria? What are your restatement criteria? Do you have any external obligations to banks, you know, government lenders, partners, shareholders, or boards in terms of making sure you can justify and support your decisions in a way that's very easy to defend against a claim of discrimination, for example. Doing this ahead of time will help you make sound decision and be prepared for what's to come and ensure you're in compliance. So let's talk about the next and final significant step in the process, bringing them back. Okay, so now you've had time to think, plan, and contemplate all these things. And the last thing you want to do is swing open the doors and assume everyone is going to get it in a staff meeting or an email. You definitely want to help them and yourself. Disruption has been huge. Changes you might have to make are too. So cut yourself and them some slack if people are edgy, confused, or otherwise sort of out of sorts. You need to seek as best you can to clarify with them what you know, your direction, and list their help, their skills, expertise, and observations to make this transition successful. So when we talk about bringing them back and the return plan, things to think about. Decide on the who, how, and when people return. This is your timing and your logistics. Is it all at once? Is it a staggered schedule based on certain benchmarks of any kind? Don't skip the onboarding. The basic administrative handling of things like reinstating sick time and vacation time per your policies or the law, adhering to any specific plan rules regarding health insurance, compensation incentives, and even things like updating I-9s if you haven't done those in the last 3 years. You have to be willing to, and here at this point, set expectations. You know, what are you up against? Not just an all-hands meeting or a memo, but use this as an opportunity. Here's what we're dealing with. What do you know and not know? And then almost invite them into your challenge and the uncertainties. Help them help you see the opportunities for making things better, smoothing out the wrinkles. They're going to be able to see things you can't when they're out there working. Be prepared for hiccups. New processes, sensitivities about health and safety, fear, people relearning unfamiliar skills. You're going to have challenges. probably a good majority of us have heard the story about a coworker who has said, I'm not coming in until there's a vaccine. No matter what their motivation is, they feel very strongly about that. This is going to be a difficult transition for some people and some organizations. So again, be prepared for those hiccups. Have a sense of how you would respond to those things as they come up. Implement focused communications. So here's where we're coming from. Your goals when you're trying to reach out deliberately with your people are to gather information. You're fielding questions and concerns. You want to be able to adjust situations that aren't working as expected or could be better. And you're also trying to be mindful of employee morale. I mean, what are they thinking? How are things going? Are they nervous? Are things just how they always were? Ways you could do this. It could be one-on-one check-ins, could be small groups, all hands meetings, depending on the size of your organization, departments. Find a way that works for you in terms of you being able to engage with people and get a read on what they're thinking. One thing you got to note when it comes to items like communication, this is really easy to lay out certain things to think about, but if you touch this, you need to be prepared to act on it in a really transparent way. If you say, I'm listening, if you say, we want to hear what you have to say, if that feedback isn't acknowledged or simply ignored, you're really going to lose credibility quickly. And it's not that you have to agree with everything they suggest or act on everything they suggest, but the dignity of a response when someone brings something forward is going to be really, really important. And this, when you're busy, this could be one of the first things that potentially you feel like dropping. You know, Deanna, this is going a lot faster than I thought it would, but that's okay. So here's some things to think about as you wrap up here. So just revisiting this particular slide. First off, determine where you are in this response process. Are you at the reduction phase, maintaining communication? I mean, where is it? Where do you think you are in terms of this process? Begin creating your communications plan and executing on it. So if you have people out there who are on reduced hours, you let them go, reach out to them. You don't have to promise them something you can't deliver. Reach out to them. How are they doing? Be yourself and see what's going on. Find out what they know. Tell them what you know. Begin taking inventory of your available HR plan related documentation and start working to close any gaps that you think you have. Ensure you have really good documentation for your employee reduction decisions and begin that work on the bringing them back planning. It's, again, very tempting just to think everything's going to be fine and nothing's going to change. Highly doubtful that the workplaces are going to be the same in the short term. Long term remains to be seen. So for those of you interested in having my support, I've set aside a few free consultations and we can sit down together and look at what your company needs most right now. Whether you have some documentation in place or not at all, it doesn't really matter from my perspective. The key is to get something in place as soon as possible so those changes are implemented smoothly and you're protected from any future grievances. So during that time, we're going to identify first the most important changes you want to make for your business and how you can be protected. Second, the fastest and easiest way to create or update your documents to reflect your newest changes. Third, the best next steps you can take to have your HR plan up and running so everything's ready to roll when employees come back. And if this is something you're interested in, all you need to do is go to the URL on this page here, vantagepoint-hr.help/consult and choose a time. So again, free consultations. I do have a limit on how many I can do. I just want to encourage you to hop in there now and try to find a time that works for you. I'm doing several of these webinars and I want to make sure you have an opportunity to meet with me. So again, just choose a time on my calendar, time that works for you. This will be a great chance to connect and see what your business needs. So I'm going to open this up for questions. What is on people's minds?
Hey, Tom. It's Josh, Dick's Auto Group. How are you? That was awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
So we're very much in the bringing people backstage and also I've asked to join on this call, office manager and HR for our Dodge and Ford stores. Hi, Lisa. So when you're talking about people that you may not want to bring back, whether your business has changed, your business model, you may not need the staff that you thought you did. What's the best way to handle either having or not having those conversations with, a handful of people that you don't intend to bring back? But I think most people who are still furloughed feel like, that was sort of done in good faith so they could collect unemployment and just sort of transition into the COVID phase and before the bringing back phase. So as far as having a conversation with people, or, what's best there? Because you wouldn't want to be like, hey, actually, you're not coming back, because that may be like you said, legal troubles, whatever could follow if the expectation was that their job was here, right?
Yeah. At the same time, though, if you realize these decisions we're all going to be confronting this in some way and in our own way. And if it's clear to you at this point that you're not going to be bringing those people back, I would take steps to start making that happen. If you think certain things were said that weren't helpful, like, we love you all, we're going to bring you back, I promise. This was really gut-wrenching for a lot of people and decision makers. You could be looking at things like, if you are going to let some people go and you're concerned about it, severance packages, small, they don't have to be massive, but anything that you have that maybe involves a release that they can sign to sort of put off the risk of litigation, that could be one thing. You could look at covering health insurance for a while too, or covering COBRA as that comes up. But ultimately, what I'm trying to compel in this conversation is there are decisions to be made. There's no reason why you can't start wrestling with what those things are now. If waiting is smart, that's fine. But if you're not going to know more in 2 months than you do now, one of the options you might want to entertain is just, letting them go, but letting them go in a way that works for you and doesn't have to be cruel necessarily. And how you implement that too, the meetings, et cetera, different kind of topic. But if you're going to do it, I would seriously look at getting a hold of your attorney and drawing up a release and looking at a severance package, if that's something you can do.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question for you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
How does this affect, or what would your recommendations for people that have received PPP money? If you are planning to lay someone off, but you need to pay them so that you don't get your PPP money is forgivable, you need to pay these people. Is that something that could be part of a severance package? Has that been broached with PPP money, or is that beyond your expertise? And also, what if you bring them back to pay for that PPP pay period and then move forward with a severance package? I don't. There's just some gray areas of bringing them back versus not.
Yeah, I mean, the fair points. I haven't heard anything. This is where I put this in two spaces. I put the relationship, the business relationship with you and the employee in one camp, and then on the other side, you've got you and your obligations to the government having received certain money. I doubt you could sign away any obligations you have in the government for, what becomes a grant versus and forgivable versus what becomes a loan. So yeah, this is a weird one because, for example, there were reading a few articles lately, restaurant owners who didn't take PPP in the beginning because they didn't want to take on the debt, and they were wondering, what am I bringing them back to? I can't operate, and I have no clear idea about how I would do something on an interim basis. So it's going to get down to a cash flow, business solvency. What do you need moving forward? I mean, easy to say, hard to do. But okay, you have this money obligation. You also have these people that you want to do good by. You could potentially bring them in and have them, I don't know, do something that's not really a job. You could pay them to sit at home during that time. I think you're going to have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you gracefully exit from the government obligation, as well as let employees go if you're going to do that. It's a matter of what should you do versus what could you do, I think. And that's more of a, how do you want this to land ultimately? People are going to have a lot of latitude. So I think Deanna brought this up to me a while back, and I've heard it from a few other people too. The employee that doesn't want to come back because they're making more money on unemployment with the extra weekly that's out there. So irritating on one hand. I understand it from their perspective, but an employer oftentimes is going to have a choice. Unless there's some protected leaves and other things in play here, you're going to have a choice about whether to be a kind of a hard ass about this, or soft pedal it, or you can position this a lot of different ways. And I think for me, it would get down to, what does you or anyone on this call, what does the decision maker want to have happening? And is this something that we could back into reasonably?
Tom,
does that answer your question?
I just found an article that talked about what payroll costs include for PPP, and it's salary, wages, commissions, and tips up to $100,000 annualized for each employee. Employee benefits, including paid leave, severance pay, insurance premium, and retirement benefits. So it does include severance pay. So as an option.
Yeah, I mean, there's some, my wife's an accountant for a 60-person company in Washington County, and she's really, really sharp. And I can tell you that she has spent the last 3 days trying to pull together the data for the paperwork to satisfy some of the requirements for reporting on PPP. So I point that out just to say, let's just all acknowledge this stuff is convoluted and it's detailed. But I'm still, and I think one of the things I want to convey here with this presentation is I think you can plan a desired outcome. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be, it's not that no one's going to be upset or no hard decisions will be made, but I believe there is a path forward here. And part of that deliberation is the type of question you're asking, Brad, and Deanna bringing up very good detailed information. How does this pencil out? And even if it does pencil out, how do you want to play this? I mean, what are those skills you want to keep? How soft a landing do you want to try to deliver for people? And do you even have the option of delivering a soft landing, or you just need to cut ties?
Tom, can I ask about the phasing approach? And I know in phase 2 is when they start talking about office workers, right? So I'll just use our office as an example. We've had people in on a regular basis and shifts. And I know someone who's, bringing folks back to their business, and the building that they're in opens, I think, later in June. And they're really struggling with employees saying, but, we've been really productive at home. And we don't see a compelling reason why we would come into a building when, in phase 1, when office, workers aren't really required, or, aren't even part of the implementation until phase 2. What is, this is a service organization. And so working from home has been, kind of isolated from the customers and from the team. And so how do you sort of help folks that have felt like, I've been a great employee from home, I don't see the need for a change, that, you know, we are going to bring you back to the office, and we are going to have, you know, an office setting as opposed to a work from home setting.
When you say it's a service company, without going into too much details, like they're typically facing customers?
I think it's more from a standpoint of doing outreach and research, and again, it's really about the team collaborating together, and that's been a difficulty in terms of telecommuting. Even though Zoom meetings are great, we all know that there's a lot of, you know, things that get lost in translation within their own work team, and things don't get communicated back with the frequency they would if you were on the same floor in the same building with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's, you know, in their minds, I guess, that's, you know, I've been rocking this, right? This stay-at-home thing, and I don't see why we're changing it. This is, you know, it's a great model we have going on here. But I think that it's really about that collaboration, and that's hard for you to gauge what impact that's had on productivity.
Yeah, and you're going to get a lot of differences of opinion. So how do you walk them through this? You might just want to have an honest conversation about what your intentions are, and let the back and forth happen a bit. And you could, of course, order anybody to, you know, as an employer, to, as long as you're within the bounds, you know, thou shalt come in. I've seen this in multiple companies. Work from home is a great idea. Work from home is a terrible idea. We need this. We need, you know, for all the reasons you mentioned. And I get the wisdom of all of it, but you're going to have a choice as to how you're going to want to. Do you compromise? Do you say, okay, we're going to rotate and you're going to do the work from home thing, and we're going to have staggered shifts, but you're going to, or do you just say, no, we're coming back? They may not buy into it. There may not be a great argument that is going to persuade them. And ultimately, I think, Deanna, you made a really good point of, if the decision is, we just feel this is where we need to be, it doesn't have to be a debate, nor does it have to be an argument. Right. There may be certain things. I've run into a handful of people. Of course, I haven't surveyed anybody. One fellow I know who's he's a project manager for a software development company. He very explicitly said, I'm afraid to go back to work because my people are so much more productive in this environment than they ever were in the office. And I don't hear that a lot. So it could be there are certain roles, certain functions that thrive in this. This is a, what do you want to have happen? How much control do you want to have? This could be a quality of life, workplace / benefit thing. You could approach this a lot of different ways. But ultimately it's going to get down to, do you want them there? And do they want to be there? And if they show up, are they going to come up? Are they going to show up completely? Or are they going to be there dragging their feet like a kid who doesn't want to go to the store with somebody? I think you're going to have to develop a posture that you want to pursue, and be prepared for what's going to happen if someone's like, no, or they're just going to be a pain in the butt when they do come back.
Right.
A long-winded answer to a very authentic question. I mean,
questions from our rest of our participants?
I would just say that as a customer or client of Tom's, it's well worth it. We started doing our business is 9 people, part-time and full-time. And we did basically what he talked about, the HR plan of the book, the job description, everything, got everything in paper. Luckily, about the 6 months, we started about 6 months ago before this, it was pretty quick and painless process, and very affordable, or well worth the money for us. So I would just give a recommendation to use Tom's services. It's been great for us on our end.
I would second that. I think Josh had a question about layoffs and and making a furlough like a permanent layoff. And I can just, explain the process we went through, because we did end up doing that. We had, sort of a bigger furlough, and then because of, not having any certainty, and then we followed sort of the rules of furlough. So I required the staff, all of our staff, to meet with us every Friday, those that were currently on staff and those that were furloughed. And we, the main topic of discussion was the budget and the uncertainty of the budget, and the fact that, at some point in time, we have to make some decisions. And as we get more clarity around our funding streams, we will make some decisions, and the decisions will be difficult. And so we ended up then actually doing a couple of permanent layoffs, but I made the phone call to the employee and talked them through it. Because we had such communication around the uncertainty of our budget, they were very understanding and almost, expected it. And then I followed it up with a letter that, and then gave them a letter of recommendation as well. And we have had no problems and no issues, just because of that really robust communication every week. And it's, it's awkward to have folks that are working and folks that are not working on the same call and to participate at the same level, but it helped us maintain communications as a team, but also I think really amplified the conversation around the budget and where we were at every single week and what we had clarity on, what we didn't.
Yeah, everyone's
helpful.
Go ahead, John.
Sorry, yeah. Deanna, what did you have in mind as far as, was there discussion on having the furloughed then laid off employee maintain eligibility for unemployment benefits and federal stuff, all that?
Right. Yes.
That's the interesting part to me, because there's 2 months left of the first round of federal grants or federal, stimulus that people are going to get, and talks of even more. So I'm just wondering about, keeping the employees' eligibility and that kind of stuff.
Right. So we knew that, that the furlough status meant that, but it was really furlough for 4 weeks. It was the standard, status. And then after 4 weeks, you have to, start looking for a job. They have not been, sort of adhering to those rules and regulations. But I just needed to let them know that, as soon as possible, that, we weren't going to be able to bring them back, so that, in the masses, they were able to look for opportunities, and it wasn't something where their benefits were used right up to the line. And then we told them, yeah, we're not going to bring you back, where now they're out with the rest of the, all the rest of those millions of people trying to find a job. So for us, it was just as quick as possible to make those decisions, as difficult as they were.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of all these questions are really, really good. My responses to them would probably vary slightly based on the person I'm talking with, because it's the tools you're working with. You have access to the same tools, but it's, for example, if you're really constrained on cash, that makes things really clear about where you need to focus. It may be painful, but it's almost easier to zero in on things. If you're a company that's doing okay, but you can't see the future, that's a different kind of conversation about what's the right thing to do. So depending on resources and the values of the person making the decision, your posture and your response can vary quite a bit, and I'm okay with that. That's good. That's a conversation I'd want to have with somebody. But yeah, this gets down to what makes the most sense for your organization and also the employees as well. But all that's driven by the decision maker at the top. I've had some people who, for very personal convictions, have bent over backwards to really, really cushion the blow for employees, and others who let everyone go in the first week because that was just what had to be done. And it was probably the most compassionate thing they could have done at that point. But yeah, everyone's approaching this with a different value set. And short of, running afoul of the law or making a very, specific discriminatory decision, I'm fairly comfortable supporting people in whatever outcome they want to try and achieve.
You make a great point about, cash flow, because that was an impact for us, where the furloughed employees, we were continuing to pay their health care through the 8 weeks of the furlough until, it just became quite clear what, the writing on the wall for our organization, and the fact that, that was going to be an expense that we really couldn't continue to carry on too much longer. So that was a factor for us making a probably a quicker decision than we would have had to, but just to really preserve cash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the first thing for any organization at this point. Let's survive. I mean, hopefully I didn't jolt too many people with that little subtitle, but that's where that came from initially, was what do you need to do to survive? If you're stable right now, that's good. But again, I have no sense personally, and I suspect others feel similarly, that we know what the future is going to hold. This is going to be staged. And if this does come back and set us backwards, what position do you want to be in? I don't think it's helpful to just wait for the all clear or assume that everything's just going to be fine again in a bit. But that's not always a conversation people are comfortable or ready to have.
Great. All right, folks, other questions, comments, situations you'd like Tom to solve for you?
World hunger.
Yes.
No, I appreciate everyone coming out today. First run of the content, but I've been working on it for a bit. And my hope is in the coming weeks to do some deep dives into each one of those phases of that graph, so that people really want to go through that in detail. We can get a little more granular on that and help them walk through some of that if they haven't done it already.
It was excellent. Thank you, Tom. Great information. Really timely as well. We're all in the same situation where we're trying to figure out, how this is going to work, and what we can do legally and what we need to do, from an empathetic employer standpoint.
And Josh, go ahead.
I just wanted to share something with you because this is so appropriate. We brought our first employee back on Tuesday, and it started with some miscommunication about when she was starting, because she didn't show up when she was supposed to. But it's only been 2 days and it's gone downhill from there. I got an email from her last night with her list of demands. So this whole COVID thing has done things to people that are just showing up in weird ways. Like, she would have never written that email prior to COVID. And yet, she felt compelled to do it. And it was, one of her demands was a job description. So there you are, Tom. There's some data for that. But there were other things too, like how much she wanted to work and didn't want to work and things like that, which I was totally caught by surprise. So I will be scheduling some time using your little URL here.
Yeah, interesting times to say the least. Josh, you're two people too. If there's if they want to just talk shop or talk anything specific, totally okay. My experience has been that the smartest HR people I know talk to other HR people just to make sure, hey, how would you approach this? What does this look like to you? So if I can be that for somebody else, I'm more than willing to.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, and I would have to second Juanita. It is, there's such interesting dynamics that folks are in a different place than they were. And if it's a fear-based place, then they're going to, respond entirely different than if it was, based on commerce, right? I'm getting my business started. I'm excited about that. And I think oftentimes it's fear-based, and it's just difficult to help people overcome those fears. I found that staged approach, 2 days a week, then, and I was talking to one of my staff today, and I'm like, so next week, the big surprise is going to be, so now you need to pick the next day. So everybody has to be here 3 days a week, and just sort of giving them comfort for sort of what that feels like. The fact that we've got plenty of room, we've got safety precautions, those kinds of things. But it's really kind of bringing them back, sort of like we're opening up in phases, that we, until we get everybody here. And to think about it, having, 7 or 8 people here 40 hours a week is now all of a sudden sort of like a memory. I'm like, what's that going to be like? Noisy, I think.
Yeah, this reminds me of all the change management stuff I've studied over time. I mean, this is just unusual for everybody. And you could logically think through all this stuff. Emotionally, we're all going through the same stages of just getting used to this, getting reacclimated to it. None of us are, so if any one of you on this call are feeling a little uneasy or edgy or irritable or, insert emotion here, you're fine. You're perfectly normal. This is, none of us gets a pass in managing the emotional roller coaster that's been put in front of us.
I also heard from another business that that their employees that were like working from home had their own like staff Zoom meeting to talk about their concerns without the employer, and then they presented, their concerns as a staff together to the employer after the fact. And that just gets a little more difficult in terms of managing communication and seeing this as a team effort as opposed to a them and me effort.
Yeah, there could be ample opportunities here to clarify what's important to you and maybe make things better.
Right.
It really is going to be up to that decision maker and the leadership to determine how do they want to ride this wave. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. And I don't want this to convey a Pollyanna optimism, but you really could go through some of these steps and make people feel like they're heard and establish some really good connections and trust and cohesiveness moving forward without necessarily capitulating and bending over backwards and doing something you don't want to do. But it's you're convincing people, you're selling them on the idea that you're a good employer they want to come back to, and they should come back to it in this way.
Tom, are you willing to share your slides with our attendees?
It probably wouldn't, I could share a few, but in their current form probably wouldn't make sense without a lot of the content that I was working off of.
Got it.
Thank you everyone for the opportunity. Hopefully some food for thought. If you want to, again, talk through anything, feel free to set up some time and we can make sure that happens, and appreciate all the good questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Thanks to
Thanks,
everybody.
Tom.
See you next
folks.
week.